In this video, we're going to be sharing a 2017 paper which shares 5 rules that will help you transition into minimalist footwear shoes as safely as possible. Welcome back, Run Smarter Scholars. Today we have a paper to talk about which was published by Warren and Gruber and titled Transitioning into Minimalist Footwear. And it is a systematic review, but also had concluded clinical recommendations at the end. So let's dive into these 5 rules. Rule number 1 is to establish a preparation phase. And this paper mentions doing things like light walking and just everyday activities in your minimalist footwear or in bare feet should be done to prepare the body before doing any running in these minimalist shoes. But I'll also add that strength training can also be added, and you can do things like individual foot strengthening, such as exercises on a wobble board, as well as your regular strengthening exercises like lunges and squats. And this can help build up the foot strength before transitioning into running with minimalist shoes. And the paper recommends that this can be done for several weeks before even attempting to run in minimalist shoes. Rule number 2 is to reduce your overall training load. And they said that this can reduce in the neighborhood of 10 to 20% in the first 2 weeks as you're running in these minimalist shoes. And the paper mentioned that this phase is crucial in order to reduce the risk of bony injuries from unfamiliar repetitive loading. So just trying to reduce the risk of an injury happening during that first week of implementing these minimalist shoes. So keep in mind, it is important to try and find the right time within your training, maybe an off season where you can reduce that overall running mileage to then transition into these shoes. Rule number 3 is that the overall transition period should be no less than 4 to 8 weeks. So you do need to be quite patient. And like I said before, you need to try and find the right time within your training to see when this is particularly suitable. Rule number 4 talks about the build-up phase. So once you've gone through 1 or 2 weeks in these minimalist shoes, how can we then build up safely? So the paper mentions to use a hybrid approach of mileage volume, but also something that's time-based. And they used an example of 10% of your running volume, but up to a maximum of 10 minutes. And then this can be increased by 5 or 10% per week. So they're using a mileage cap, but they're also using a time cap. And this hybrid rule actually eliminates blanket statements using only minutes or using only mileage, which with something so simplistic can lead to an overload in extreme cases. And this paper actually focuses on someone who is a higher mileage runner, which is on the left here, compared to a low mileage runner on the right. And this high mileage runner is only using a mileage or volume based rule, and it's actually too much, whereas this low mileage runner is using minutes, and that is too much for them. So having the hybrid between the two can be really helpful. Number 5 is just to tweak these recommendations based on individual circumstances. So the paper mentions that females may need to be a little bit more patient and a little bit more gradual with this phase, but also the paper mentions males that have a body mass greater than 85.7 kilograms can also be at greater risk, and therefore their transition phase should be a little bit more patient and a little bit more gradual. I'll jump in here and add another thing, and it also depends on what shoes you're already adapted to and what shoe you want to progress and transition into. So you might have a shoe that's 50% on the minimalist index and want to transition all the way to something that's 100% on the minimalist index. Compare that to if you're used to something that's 40% and you wanted to get to something that's 20%, bridging the gap between those two values isn't as much, and therefore the transition phase doesn't need to be as gradual. If you haven't heard of the minimalist index before and how you can rate your shoes and score your shoes, then I've done another video to help explain all of that, and so you can walk through the steps and actually assign a minimalist index percentage to your current shoes and the shoes you want to transition into. So you can go ahead and check that out, and hopefully that can help you plan the transition phase.